right, cool. We're live. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Nice. Now, first question, just introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Right. My name's Meredith McCarthy. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I also teach meditation. I have trained to be a yoga instructor. I enjoy inspiring people and helping them through their blocks and fears and phobias.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of yoga, even though that's not what we're going to talk about today. But I'm a
Well, it's like the
fan.
yoga mind, right?
Big time.
So hypnotherapy is the ultimate yogic practice.
Is that
Because
right?
you have to be very mindful about how you are talking, the kind of suggestions, the story that you're holding.
I went and, yeah, I totally agree. I went to one of those, I think about just trying to get yourself in like a very sedated space is what I try and get to when I'm doing yoga, and same with like meditation. I went to one of those sensory deprivation tanks.
Oh, yeah.
Have you been in those?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The one like literally just down the road from over here.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that a similar state to what you try and get people to when you are doing hypnotherapy?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So your brain waves slow down into a more open, suggestible state of being. So you are in your flow state. The theta waves, alpha, theta, delta, yeah? So you're in
break
theta.
that down for me because I've got no idea.
Well, in our normal awake state, we're very critical.
Mm-hmm.
And our brain is working differently when we're in our critical space. When we're in our creative space or our flow space, our brain starts to work differently, and the binaural beats per minute slow down, and you can actually see the alpha and theta waves coming in. If you've got a monitor on your brain, you can actually see the difference.
And what are some of the techniques, I guess, are just calming yourself down? Because like as a comedian, I would love to know how to get like more into those creative states.
Right. A good way is being present.
Mm-hmm.
Simply just being here rather than being racing off into your own thoughts about the past or the future or that sort of thing. Just being grounded and being in the moment is actually a big part of that practice.
Right. Okay. And so I think one of like the biggest questions that I hear, because you are a hypnotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, first thing I think when I hear that is magician with a watch waving it in front of me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess, does hypnotherapy actually work? And that's actually probably too broad of a question.
Yeah.
What does hypnotherapy work for?
Let's get back to the watch for a moment. Mesmerism. This was where look into my eyes.
You keep talking. I'm just going to try and this.
You're getting sleepy, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
That's from the mesmerism side of history. That's before it was called hypnotherapy. So it was called mesmerism. Strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about Emile Coué, he was a pharmacist, a French pharmacist, and he understood the power of suggestion. He would give sugar pills to people and go, every day in every way you're going to feel better and better. And he noticed that how powerful those were in comparison to the normal medication. They were just as powerful. So there's a lot in the way of a hypnotherapist and the idea of putting someone into hypnosis. So the mesmerism is I've got power over you. The Emile Coué is more of that understanding the power of suggestion. And that the power of suggestion is also about how we tell our own story. So if you say, I'm going to be relaxed and calm, you're more likely to be relaxed and calm. If you say, I hope I'm not going to get stressed and worried, then you're more likely to be stressed and worried because you've pointed your mind into what you don't want rather than focusing on what you desire.
Right.
So hypnosis actually happens instantly all the time within our given day. So we go into daydreamy-like states where we're focused or fixated on something for a period of time, and we have a process going on where we make decisions. So that's actually your own self-hypnosis.
And so what you guys are doing as a hypnotherapist is you're trying to put somebody in that state and then use the power of suggestion.
Correct.
To then alter people's ways of thought.
So everyone goes naturally into hypnosis. I'm just guiding them.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not putting them under. So that kind of means that I've got control over them in some way. I can, through the art of suggestion, probably control a lot of people, but in a sort of session, it's different. You want to really be focused on empowering them to empower themselves.
Is that kind of like, it sounds like what you're talking about is like TM, transcendental meditation? Similar. With transcendental meditation, it is the individual putting themselves in that state and then actively putting those thoughts into their own mind as well.
Yeah.
Would you say it's different in that instead of the individual doing it, is you putting those?
So when I'm talking to a client, I'm looking for the treasure. I'm looking for their golden nuggets of things they want or desire that are opposite to their status quo at the current time. Let's say they have a fear of heights. Their story about the fear of heights is going to be reinforced accidentally when they start to think about what's coming ahead and start to imagine how they're going to be, but it's not always positive. Right? So their mind starts to get out of control and it starts to compound a negative suggestion. What I need to do is interrupt that and help them to interrupt that. Say, okay, you had been doing that. What's the future though? What do you want? So as I'm interviewing, as I'm looking and talking to that person, I'm inviting them to think about putting things in past tense and starting to future pace. Start to get them to imagine success in their mind, what that looks like, sounds like, feels like. So that's a big part of the process. So a lot of the magic actually happens before they formally get hypnotized.
Right.
Because when we go into a very thoughtful conversation, you're naturally going into a hypnotic state where you're focused for a period of time on a specific thing. And then you're more open to suggestion, of course, because you're processing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And it sounds like anybody can get into that state. So does hypnotherapy work on everybody?
Everyone has the ability to enter into that hypnotic mind. However, some people might be very, very medicated. So it stops their ability to imagine. So antipsychotic drugs and other things that could interfere with someone potentially working with that hypnotic sort of session. There are some people who are super, super paranoid and stressed, and unless you've got that rapport, that trusted connection with that person, they're just going to stop you from working with them. So there are going to be some personalities that potentially are a little bit harder to work with than others.
Do you have to be like, I guess obviously you have to be willing to submit yourself to being able to just, calm down and relax and get into that position. But I was always under the impression that like, if you come into it with a bit of skepticism, like I don't think hypnotherapy actually works.
You'd be surprised.
Is that right?
Yeah. I think if you trust the person that you're working with, something happens and your ego and your fears park and your creative, curious part, like that 4-year-old self or that 3-year-old self, comes out and plays. And that's really, a big part of, I guess, the therapeutic journey. They've come in, they're invested in wanting to change. So they're very curious. Even if they might be a bit skeptical, as the process unfolds, they start to see how they're shifting somehow. They might not understand always how they've shifted, but that's not as important as the shift itself.
And obviously it varies from case to case, right? But like what, what's the typical type of person that you're seeing when it comes to like hypnotherapy? Is it usually like I'm feeling somewhat lost in my life, or I'm dealing with serious trauma related to this incident? Is it a bit of everything and anything?
Yeah, it's very varied. But most of it is stress and anxiety related, because most uncomfortable positions emotionally have stress and anxiety laced into it, which causes them to action to change it. So I call it positive stress, actually, because it's got them motivated enough to cause them to want to change.
Which is huge, because I think that's the whole point of having anxiety in the first place, is it's like, I'm anxious about this situation, let me try and change it. Yeah, of course it comes to unmanageable levels and stuff like that. But so you're saying it's typically with just, is it low level anxiety, low level stress?
Oh, no. Sometimes people really, like, they've had panic attacks and they've been in hospital because they thought they were having a heart attack, and they've been picked up by the police on the side of the road because they've just lost the plot. I'm getting some extreme people coming in that are really suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And hypnotherapy is a qualified medical profession, correct?
Okay, so anyone can put up their shingle and say they're a hypnotherapist.
Sure.
But I did do training. It's not psychology. So a lot of people think I've been to university or Welltech or whatever. It's a private school usually you go to. So I had been a trainer for the last 8 years for the New Zealand School of Professional Hypnotherapists. And that was fun to pass on the mantle. But that's over a year of training. They have reading and assignments and one-on-one with each other in a classroom situation once a month in the weekend. So that I'm the facilitator, or was. I just finished last year.
Oh, cool.
So just finished.
Are you happy to be done doing some new stuff?
I think eight years is good. And I'm ready for something a little bit more to challenge myself on, and that does steal time away from me and doing my own retreats and wellness workshops and other stuff that I want to get on with.
Huge. And so there's definitely qualifications behind it. How is it looked upon by the medical profession?
Starting to change. So look, I've been doing this 27 years, and when I first started it was hard going. I was really young, and the world has changed, and I think because of the internet, because of different scientific studies and other things, it's really brought the light into the hypnotic mind and how powerful that could be as a therapeutic tool in the toolkit. And a lot of times we're getting results for different disorders in 1 to 3 sessions, where a traditional psychotherapist might be seeing that person for 1 or 2 years. And the doctors are noticing it because their patients are coming in going, hey, I got this done and I feel amazing, or they might refer on to me and then they're getting results. So they're going, wow, I'll keep on referring my patients to Meredith.
Sure. And I guess that's the first sign of a changing nature in the field, is that you're actually getting referred clients from medical professionals. But you're saying it, so before, do you think it was
hard going?
People kind of looked at it as like voodoo, like magic.
They just didn't understand it. I think there was a lot of fear involved. Things that people don't understand, they fear. And I think science has helped us to understand more about how the mind works and how it learns, and the neuroplasticity, the way we can rewire our brain. And hypnotherapy is like the perfect tool for that.
Well, it's interesting that you say neuroplasticity, because I had a gentleman on called Nathan Wallace, who's a neuroscientist, and he's a speaker for like early childhood development. And he talks so much about how malleable the human brain is. And I even think about this in the context of, as a comedian, like self-deprecating humor, where it can be funny and it's like, oh, don't take yourself too seriously. But you also play into the notion of like, I'm somewhat talking crap about myself, even if in a joking way. And I'm sure that subconsciously reinforces certain images or ideas about myself.
The brain has this ability to compartmentalize our storylines, so we can play different characters in different scenes. So you aren't the same person with all of your friends, right? You play a different role with different people because they'll unlock an aspect of yourself. So when you're up on stage, you're doing that too. You're putting a character on. It's like a good, not just comedians, but actors as well. They have the ability to transcend their own personality for a moment and hop into a pseudo personality, if you like, or maybe it is a part of them that they get permission to express. That can be a nice release.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you are different people according to who you're around. Sure. Like I am definitely different in this context and different in other situations. Is like an ideal state for someone to be, though, is to have like a solid, consistent line where they are consistently the person that they feel Well, what's your thoughts on that? They're being like, what's your thoughts on the true self? Like, what actually does that look like?
I don't know whether all humans can interface being their true self with all people. I think the reason why we have the ability to be a bit of a chameleon is because it suits our read on the situation, so we will adapt accordingly. It makes sense. If you keep on, let's say I'm talking to someone in my higher self sort of space, but they're not ready for that. That could be quite mind-blowing and very challenging for me to just kind of come up with concepts or things that their brain has not entered into. And they're going, woo, and they get scared. Why would you do that? You'd have to adapt. You adapt how you tell your story. So you might dull it down a little.
Yeah.
Because that person can only hear it at that level.
Yeah.
Or you dial it up a little bit more because the person can hear you at
just
that other frequency of understanding, you know?
Yeah, I totally get you. But at the same time, we do idolize people who are like uncompromising in terms of who they are, right?
I think that means that followers happen, right?
Sure.
So you might get someone who's written a book or done some amazing work and they've been known to be that person. Then you're going to get the crowd of what we call fans, which is great, but there equally be critics. There'll be those people that they just can't interface with.
Yeah.
So what I like when I'm doing my retreats, for example, and I'm teaching meditation, it's not really about religion. It's about a practice and an understanding of how you can use meditation or your mind in a really useful way. And I end up attracting people who would never go to a Buddhist monastery or never go to a religious organization to learn that sort of thing. But they'll come to me because I'm what we call neutral. Yet, I have a deep understanding of the spiritual and religious connotations to it, but I don't necessarily have to share all of that because that's not necessary for that particular person sitting in front of me.
Right.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. What religion do you think gets it closest to being in an ideal mindset, you know? Or
Buddhism.
Buddhism?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Take away the dogma or the ceremonial aspect of it, and we get back to general understandings and the general practice of meditation and so on. You see time and time again the Buddhist monks have got something there. They're able to measure what's going on in a Buddhist monk's brain when they enter into meditation. You can see they function differently. So why wouldn't you learn that, right?
And the things that they kind of bring out that are most valuable, I guess, are sense of self-awareness, compassion.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's harnessed through meditation.
Yeah.
And then you take aspects of that into hypnotherapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess some of the reservations people would have is like the religious dogma around certain things, right? And the cultural differences.
Definitely.
And so you're saying you act as kind of like a mediator between those two. So you take the purely, not necessarily scientific, but like the aspects that, meditation, for example, and remove any kind of, not ritual, but religious ritual around it, and then give it to people. Do you see people translating from what you do, giving them that, and then actually going into like the religious side of things? So it's like, okay, yeah, meditation was great. I'm going to get into Buddhism because I know that they show a lot or they practice.
I couldn't tell you because I'm not interviewing everyone after they leave my presence, so I wouldn't know. But I do know that people have been curious about Buddhism but haven't gone fully into it, and they might use a retreat that I've done as a stepping stone.
Yeah. As like a
because
nice
they're a little bit curious, but they're not fully ready to turn up to a place that they're really unfamiliar with.
To do the leap. Yeah. I get it. Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
So you were saying like the most common issues people use hypnotherapy is for anxiety and I guess stress in general. I've heard of people using cases like hypnotherapy, and not necessarily hypnotherapy, but I guess hypnosis to manage physical pain as well.
Yeah.
Like mind over matter. Can you induce that as a hypnotherapist, or is that something that somebody has to practice themselves? And how long does that take to get there?
Okay. So somnambulism is the word that you are using as a deep state of a hypnotic mind's ability to disconnect the pain receptors from the brain from that part of the body. So yes, most people can learn to do that. Some people are going to be better at that than others, potentially. But lots of people have had full operations on their teeth, like getting the wisdom teeth out under hypnosis, no general anesthetic or analgesia or anything, just using the mind, right? And you can see that on YouTube and other places. But other people have been allergic to drugs, so they've had to use the mind and hypnosis. There have been a lot of big major operations using hypnosis. So in World War II, in the battlefield, they ran out of the anesthetic or the gas, and so they just kept on pretending they were giving it to the soldiers, and it was working.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, of course, modern anesthetics came in after that, and it sort of took over. But we could have gone down the hypnotherapy route.
Yeah.
Instead of the pharmaceutical route.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's money in pharmaceuticals, right? And then in therapy, there's not.
Yeah.
Is that? Have you ever done that? Administered like hypnotherapy to somebody who's about to go into surgery?
Myself, no. That's not something that I've attracted, strangely. But I have had people who wanted to have help with minor things like getting a full tattoo,
Yeah. And you've done that for somebody?
That. Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah, as far as I
What did
understood.
the tattoo look like? You gotta hypnotize them to get a different tattoo.
I don't remember now.
I can help you with the pain, but the design ain't gonna change.
But people come to me for childbirth to help with that, and that has been really nice, actually. Quite lovely to be able to do that in that part of their lives. But yeah, Brenda Sheen, a colleague of mine, she's done a lot of work around pain and pain management. So different people specialize in different things, and I think what happens is I get maybe known in this field rather than that field, and then that's the cohort of people that I end up seeing, which aren't always coming to me for pain specifically.
Is it splitting? Because I'm not going to ask you to define every single field of hypnotherapy. Are there more ones? Are there new ones that are coming about as of late? Or because we can just say we can break it down into even smaller forms like physical pain, and then it's like pain with the hand, pain with the foot. Are there new fields that are opening up within the field of hypnotherapy as a whole?
To be fair, the core toolkit is not going to change much. I'll be very surprised, because there are core understandings that as a hypnotherapist across the board, you should be able to deal with anything that comes through your door.
Right. Is that possible though?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
The toolkit is understanding the art of suggestion and the art of the journey with the client and changing their state. So you're going from an undesired state to a desired state. If you can do that, then you can change anything. Because everything's just a story.
Yeah. What's the most significant thing you've changed for somebody?
It's hard to say.
Yeah?
It's subjective, because I'm not in their body and I'm not in their world. So it's hard for me to say whether that's significant or not, according to me,
So you were saying that like everything's based on an underlying suggestion therapy, right? So what's the difference between suggestion therapy and like analysis therapy?
Psychoanalysis was, of course, birthed by Freud. Interesting. And it really does have a lot to do with one another, because as a hypnotherapist, if we're doing regression, we might ask the subconscious to go back to that first time they recall feeling that way or having that thought, right? So that's psychoanalysis. So you're going in to understand the birth of that particular thing, that program. Yeah. And
then you use suggestion therapy on top of that. I get you. So then I guess analysis therapy is mainstream therapy, right? Or psychology.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're definitely doing that, but we're not just, I call it masturbating the misery.
Sure.
We're not just going over and over the same old thing. It helps us to resolve that trauma rather than just sit with it and understand it more and more and more. Is
that kind of an older school
I
of
think
thought?
so. I think there was a lot of curiosity in why does someone exhibit the thing that they're exhibiting. And I think that gets a little bit gruesome after a while, where you're just not helping that person move forward. You're just re-victimizing them.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's there's a weird like sense of pleasure I think people can get by over, like, you know, you get in an argument with your friend and you just relive the argument over and over and over and over again. There's a weird sense of comfort that comes in, even though it pisses you off, you just keep doing it and keep doing it. Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah. So if someone came to me and they were doing that, I'd say, so far you've been doing that.
And you're not
what do you want to do next?
Yeah.
I'm going to challenge them, because if you continue to believe that that's what you do, then that's what you will do. If you start to shift that belief that you could change or interrupt that way of processing or masturbating the misery, then you can, right? It's just a concept away, a thought away from that reality. Then it's that action. It's remembering to action it. So with the brain doesn't understand time as much as we think it does. So there's a part of our brain that needs to be told which time frame this is in. So I had been doing that, now I'm doing this from now on. So if we can get very clear about where it is in the timeline of reality, then we can stop reliving that old pattern.
Right. And then the brain thinks it's still in an active state.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where the suggestion comes in. So if you say, I always am late to things,
which is a continuous
you will
cycle.
Continue to be late to things.
Sure.
If you say, I used to be late to things, it suggests that now you are changing that pattern to be on time or before time.
Is there an argument that somebody can completely reinvent themselves then? Like,
yeah,
entirely?
Absolutely. I like that word.
Reinvent?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does that, I mean, the thing that I can think of is like multiple personality disorder, where somebody can like, you know, completely change who they are just like that.
Yeah.
To what extent are we able to change? Because there's that idea of like, we are fundamentally this person. That's who we are at our core.
I think we're starting to understand that's not so true.
Right.
If you think about your version of you at 4, version of you at 10, version of you at 15, you know, you have actually changed quite a lot. And the programs and things that you played then aren't relevant now. So of course you change it, right? So we're constantly and have been constantly reinventing ourselves.
Yeah.
It's to the extent of how much do you want that reinvention to be? So let's say someone's been a smoker for 40 years. It doesn't mean they can't be a non-smoker for the rest of their life, right? So that's a reinvention right there. Or they've had a fear, or they've been in a certain line of work, and then they decide, no, I'm done doing that. I want to go to university and I want to improve myself and so on. That's a reinvent. So the habits of thinking, the habits of being suddenly collapse, and new habits of thinking and being take over.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like what you're talking about here would be super useful when it comes to like prison. You know, like prison work. And is there a lot of that goes on, like hypnotherapy in prisons?
Yeah, one of my old departed fellow hypnotherapists, he was amazing. He used to do a lot of work with violent offenders, and Bill Barclay, he was a good soul. And he enjoyed that kind of work. I have thought about it myself, but that's not where I've been called most. But I do know that there are a few of my students that have gone through who are quite interested in working with prisoners and that rehabilitation side of things.
Is it recognized by like ACC and stuff like that, like hypnotherapy?
This is a very interesting question. If you go as an individual hypnotherapist and go to ACC, you can become ACC registered.
Yes.
If I go under the mantle of the NZAPH, the New Zealand Association of Professional Hypnotherapists, they don't recognise.
Why is that?
Oh, it's frustrating. I think it's still slow news coming through that, you know, that this could be a very effective tool for people, especially in trauma and, you know, with work-related stress and other things that have happened that have caused them not to be able to work or whatever that is, that they've gone via ACC. Yeah.
Yeah. Things of the mind, right?
Yeah.
Are gradually coming to the forefront of things, and you see it within workplaces, right?
Yeah.
Like, wellness groups, EAP services and stuff like that, government funded therapy, and things like that. Interesting. Yeah, because I would think that in order to get involved with the prison system, you'd have to be recognized by a government body as far as offering rehabilitation services.
I think we're at a turning point where it might not be through ACC and it might not be through EAP and other things, but we can submit some things towards government for government funding in certain areas, and the government, I think, is way more open to that process of getting as many people on board to help with the mental wellness, because there's just not enough people on the ground to help the people that need it.
I totally agree. That's what I hear so much about from just therapists in general. Like when I say therapists, I mean therapists as an overall branch. There's not enough qualified personnel.
My last year, I had 32 clients. That's mad. And some of them were 90 minutes. It was like, I was tired.
Totally.
And last year was like 6 weeks booked up in advance, fully booked, and no wriggle room. And I'm going, whoa. And that's hard because you want to service the people who are coming through, and it's actually trying to fit them in. And that's not how I like to work. So it has been ridiculous since the COVID, with the stress and anxiety, and also job shifts and other things that have happened. That's really got people to stop, look and listen, and do a bit of an audit on where they are and where they're going.
And unfortunately, I think with these issues, a lot of the times people can't wait. It's like, I need to see somebody now. And it's like, well, and I even know even in private practice, I live with some, budding psychologists, and they were saying like just even in private practice, there's like a 2-month wait time, in certain cases, and the costs involved with it as well. Are there government funded subsidies for like your work? Like if a medical professional puts somebody forward, does like a community
some of the
service
DHBs will look at that and have a certain pool of funding if a GP has referred on.
Got you.
But they usually have to go, from WINS or other places. So there are little windows, but it's not a straight, this is what happens every time. And that's very frustrating to watch.
I feel like that would change with the current government we have at the moment. Do you think that's the case? Have you seen big shifts in that as far as labor being one of their big issues, being tackling mental health?
It's hard for me to comment because I've seen a lot of promise, but yet I've also seen some lag stuff happening still, where you think, really, still like that, and I'm just too busy to fight that fight, which is frustrating. But I hope younger ones that are coming through with a bit more energy and a little bit more know-how about policy and other things can really shake it up.
Make some pushes.
Yeah.
Now, I want to jump back into like where does hypnotherapy sit in someone's overall treatment for, let's say, high levels of anxiety? Is it the be-all, end-all, or is it a part of overall rehabilitation, let's say?
Maybe if I break down a typical session,
let's do that.
People to understand the toolkit that I use, and it's not just hypnosis. There's many other things that are involved. So the first thing that we need to get the person to understand is a stress response. And when we're in that stress response, we're not logical. Our limbic system has been switched on into fight, flight, freeze. This is a problem because that means that we're not going to talk ourselves through it so well. We're going to have the disaster scenario channel on. And that means that our adrenals, our whole system hormonally is different to our normal parasympathetic nervous system setting. So our sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic to the threat, is now in charge of the house. Okay? This is a problem because it means that we're reactionary. So we're not going to think about it in a logical way, but we might react in a not so great way. So we could fight, flight, go, get out of there, or freeze. Now, that's great on one level for survival in some situations, but in our modern day space, that doesn't always work, right? Mm-hmm. So you're getting a lot of people who don't want to go to work anymore because they've got anxiety, or school. Lots of people not wanting to turn up to school because they're just full of anxiety. What my job is to help them to understand the 3 keys into switching the sympathetic nervous system back into the parasympathetic nervous system setting. The first part is the breath. So if we're breathing badly, let's say we have a fright, we go, our belly gets sucked up into our diaphragmatic area. So the diaphragmatic muscle goes up and we're going to be shallow breathing. This is quite useful if it really needs to be oxygenating our system. We go, and we're getting oxygen into our extremities so we can fight or fly. However, not so useful to calm the farm, right? So when we breathe diaphragmatically, using the belly to draw the breath down, so we should be breathing in deeply and feeling the belly relax. And as we breathe in fully and deeply into the bottom of our lungs, this is a key, that sends a very clear signal to the central nervous system, I am safe, all is well. This is the first step. The second part is microtension in the body. If our body's still holding on for dear life and microtension, so externally I might not be able to see that you're tense, but internally you're holding tension somewhere. So if you can do a body scan and just go, okay, can I relax my jaw a little bit more? Can I relax my tongue a little bit more? Can I relax my throat, my neck, my shoulders, my arms, hands, fingers? Can we go through the body and begin to relax it? This is really important, because if we want to shift then the state of mind, the story, we must get those 2 other parts right. So when we sigh, so breathing in, and we relax the diaphragmatic area. This is our first part of helping our physical body to relax too. So we can actually then use that sigh action to relax that microtension throughout the body. So we breathe in, sigh it out. So the exhalation's longer than the inhalation. Mm-hmm. And it's taking that sigh and utilizing it. So when we sigh, we are sending that message into our body, okay, it's all right to relax now. Then our mind can shift to channel happy rather than channel doomsday. Mm-hmm. Because if we're still in microtension in our body and we're still breathing incorrectly, it's near impossible for the brain to shift into channel happy.
Got you. Right.
So this is where the hypnotic mindset and the idea of the power of suggestion, the power of telling the brain what you desire rather than what you don't want, is a big part of the 3 keys of relaxing.
Got you.
So breath, relax body, shift mind. What's the new story you want?
And then you tell yourself that, and then you just go through the motions. And then I guess it sounds like it gets to a point as well where you can do that yourself.
Oh, yeah. So that's a big part of what I teach a lot of my clients. Mm-hmm. Because they're accidentally building that tension, not realizing they have all the tools to undo it. They just haven't done it. A lot of people go, oh, I've done a couple of deep breaths and it doesn't work. I'm like, okay, show me. What do you do?
Yeah. Okay.
And they might do it 3 or 4 times and hope that that's going to work. It's not going to work. It takes a little longer than that. You've just dumped adrenals, adrenaline and cortisol and, all the stress hormones. And it takes about 5 minutes to process that away.
Yeah.
And shift into your happy hormone system, right? Mm-hmm. So you run up Mount Cow, and it's going to take you at least 5 minutes of recovery to stop sweating and get your heart rate regulated and all of those things. So why would you expect anything different? Because your brain feels like it's just run up Mount Cow or somewhere, really steep, and like you're running away from the lion. That's what your brain and body is starting to, experience when anxiety and stress happens. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So much of the stuff that you're talking. Have you ever heard of Wim Hof?
Yes.
Yes. So much about what you're talking about. I used to really be into Wim Hof, not enough to pay for the program, but enough to watch it on YouTube. But yeah, he was very big into the whole breathing techniques. Huge, right. You know, and I think that's where I got my question about the whole separating pain from the body and the mind, because he could do the whole ice swimming underwater and stuff like that. Yeah. Do you practice a lot of the stuff in your own time as well?
I think yes, and it's curious because when I'm doing the hypnotherapy with someone, I'm actually in hypnosis with them.
Right.
So often and frequently throughout my day, I have my eyes closed and I'm right there walking, and I kind of think about myself like a dream walker. Mm-hmm. I'm walking through their dream with them.
That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah. It's like you get the best of both worlds, essentially. Yeah. You get paid to hypnotize yourself.
And strange things happen in my sessions where I get shown something or like an intuition, and I'm in a new world that I haven't been to before, and it's really lovely. Mm-hmm. So there's another force that happens when you're working with people in the area of not just emotional wellness, but spiritual wellness. Mm. Yeah.
You ever, like, let's say somebody's really wanting to get into therapy or hypnotherapy, but they're just unable to submit themselves to that calm state. Mm. Is there any place for drugs that can be used in that instance?
So you've used submit twice now, which is a really interesting word. If we think about the guide, it's the mastery of the guide to help the student understand. And a student might take a really quick time to learn to relax or take a little longer. Mm-hmm. But the guide understands that that's the path too. That it may take a whole year for someone to learn to relax and really get good at that. And that's okay. And some people it might take a moment. And that's okay. And it's a journey of understanding. And I don't know if drugs, even psychedelic ones, are necessarily the best pathway for a lot of people, because it can bring psychosis. There are problems because biochemically we're all different. Mm-hmm. We're not the same, and the way that drug affects your brain might be quite different to how it affected someone else's. So I don't know if drugs, whether they're psychedelics in the way of mushrooms or ayahuasca or whatever, is always the answer for everyone. Mm-hmm. I think for some people it's been amazing, because they get to see worlds or understand that very thin veil that exists and always has done, but it's not necessarily the way. And a few of my clients are going, whoa, that's like tripping, when I've done the hypnosis with them. And it's like they're on drugs. Mm-hmm. So done well with the right dream walker, it's a different experience where people naturally just understand it, because we go to sleep at night and we're dreaming. This is our natural way. So most people sleep. I don't think you'd survive very long if you didn't sleep. Mm. And sleep is really psychedelic. So there's a part of your brain, the pineal gland, that releases these incredible hallucinogenic chemicals that help us to dream. Mm-hmm. That connect our worlds. Now, in a way, hypnotherapy is that bit between awake and asleep. So you are in this field of potentials where time doesn't exist the way it normally does. Anything is possible. Gravity doesn't even need to exist, and we can be multidimensional. I mean, that is the truth. Mm. So it's quite neat to be able to journey someone through that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think it sounds like you were saying in some cases it's not the best solution, and that maybe it's not even necessary in the first place. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I can understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I think naturally we're powerful.
Yeah.
And we can enter into these amazing states of insight and understanding and euphoria all by ourselves. We don't always need to have that as a pill or a substance.
I agree, but I think like some of the moves to like actually introduce some of these things are for people who can't get to that state in the first place.
According to whom can't they, you see?
Yeah, well, let's say somebody who's dealing with like seriously deep trauma, right?
Yeah.
Once again, I'm not the expert in this field, but from what I hear, traditional ways of getting them to deal with that trauma don't work, and whether or not
according to whom and who's dealing with it. So with the hypnotherapy, over 27 years plus, I have been dealing with people with deep trauma, and they have shifted that trauma. They have changed it in such an amazing way that their lives got back on track.
Have you
and they're no longer having what we call an abreaction or a subconscious reaction that they have no control over.
Have you ever had an individual who you haven't been able to get through to?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where...
But it may not be that I'm the best personal match for that person.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that there isn't another person who is.
Yeah, and I agree with you. But I think some people would say that maybe that way of going about dealing with the trauma as a whole does not work. So where you say you might not be the right individual, somebody could say, well, maybe just the whole profession or way of going about it doesn't work, and therefore we use other methods such as, especially with like, I think there's new studies with like MDMA therapy and ketamine as well is coming big into the forefront. I'm not too familiar with the whole science. So if we
look at the ayahuasca for a moment, and we think about the traditional way of taking it, you have someone who's a master at journeying you through that if you need that. It's not like you're left all by yourself to do it. You have a spiritual person who is going through that ceremony with you. There's chanting, there's other things, there's a process. So in a way, they become the dream walker with you, right? When we think about using psychoactive drugs, and you've got the wrong dream worker, even in that could be trauma. There's danger in everything to a degree, and there's also a way through it. Just depends on who's walking through that with you. I don't think there's one magic pill or one magic way. I think there are many paths, but we need to be careful that we don't go, oh, this is the next big thing.
Sure. Yeah, take this pill and I'll sort everything out. Yeah, I totally agree.
I think there's a huge part in conversation and understanding and insight that shifts people. Insight's huge. Once someone gets something, they can never unget it, and it's just like, penny drops. It's a game changer. And if you can get those people to understand that, let's say trauma, it's a moment in time, it's already been done, but on a cellular level, it feels like it hasn't been processed yet. So they're going to be triggered. It could be through smell or sight or touch or sound or whatever, through their senses. So it could be a number of those senses altogether. So if they're triggered in that trauma and they don't have the toolkit to deal with that when they get triggered, then that's going to be the same old Groundhog Day, right? They're going to do the same old thing again and again and again and again. A good therapist, whether they're a hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, counselor, or whatever, would need to address, so if that happens again, what would you like to do differently? I think this is a very powerful question across the board that needs to be asked. But quite often what happens is the therapists hop into this. So if it happens again, how do you think that might make you feel? Which is like, really? You're just going to reinforce their trauma again. A mindful therapist would be someone who says, okay, that moment's gone already. So you go into that situation again. How do you want it to be? That's important. The power of the question. If you ask the wrong questions, you're going to continuously invite the supercomputer that is the brain and the body to come up with stupid answers.
Right, which just reinforces the idea that they had in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever see, are there cases of have you ever seen cases of hypnosis being used for bad, you know? Like, and I guess it's just the power of suggestion, right? You know, there's, like gaslighting is like a form, I guess, like, you know, telling somebody a lie and then convincing them that lie is true, which is a form of hypnosis.
Propaganda was one of those words that I learned very, very early on at school, and I thought, ooh. There were a lot of people who have agendas, and they know and understand the power of stories, and stories change cultures and change actions from those cultures. That's scary. So you get people like Hitler, who had a storyline, and people bought into that story, and look what happened, right? You've got Donald Trump.
Nice segue.
Who is very good at hypnotizing the masses. Everything he says, and the way he says it, and the pace he says it, it's like the master hypnotist.
Do you see that with him?
Hell yeah.
The way he's talking, the tone?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Fascinating stuff. And he repeats the same thing 3 times at least during his speeches.
Do you think he's been trained? Or do you think he just subconsciously knows what he knows what he's doing, or...
I haven't met the man, so it's hard. Again, that subjectively hard to know what he's been and who he's been in contact with, and what has molded him into the person he is today. But I definitely think he's a psychopath, a narcissist. He's definitely both of those things.
Lack of empathy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Total disconnect from what's really the big impact that he's making. It's all about him, and that's just scary to watch.
Wow, I've never heard of him being called like hypnotic, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see his speeches and I'm just like, ugh.
I thought of myself, who's been hypnotizing him? Maybe they've done a bloody good job.
All right, you conspiracy theorists, here we go.
Absolutely one channel thinking, and he's not looking globally at it at all. It's really interesting. It's very funnel thinking.
Right, and you just see him doing, Yeah, that's a weird one. I haven't thought about it like that, but that makes total sense.
And then you've got a whole lot of people who are very open to suggestion.
Sure,
it's called the royal suggestion.
So
someone who's in a place of power, like a doctor or whatever, a lot of people will just take their word for it. They won't question it.
Yeah. You guess, the background that he has, and people would see that as like, indications of success, and therefore we see it as a truth. Wild. What a fun theory that he's quite hypnotic. Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
And so you see the most common form of hypnosis being used for bad is just in the form of propaganda. Yeah. And you usually see it on like a national level, a state level.
Look, I think it's existed where power has existed for eons. Right. People have understood the power of a story, and they've utilized it.
Yeah. You even see with branding, right? Like, let's tell a story with our company.
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes that way.
Absolutely.
Final question that I have for you. What do you think the biggest misconception people have about hypnotherapy is?
That they're going to be out of control when they get hypnotized. And I think that the stage hypnosis, where you see people being asked to do certain things, reinforces that idea. If we look at what's going on, is this person who's going up on stage believes that they're going to be out of control, therefore that becomes their reality.
Yeah, of course. Right.
So that's the ultimate in suggestion. They believe that the hypnotist has got their mind under control. That will be a reality for them. So it's ironic, really. But when we think about therapy and long-term change, that therapeutic relationship with the therapist, it's not about me controlling that person. It's about them getting back control over themselves. And all I am is teaching them tools to help them do that.
To get back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that makes so much sense, because a lot of the times when we think of hypnotherapy, we do think of a magician on stage being like, all right, now you're going to be a chicken.
Yeah.
Be a chicken.
And that's the power of suggestion, the power of belief. So you can get people believing many things, and they'll do incredible things because they believe so, right? And that's walking hypnosis. That is everyday hypnosis you see playing out again and again all over the place.
Right.
Yeah. It's just being mindful about what you're actually suggesting.
Right. And knowing the implications and everything like that.
Yeah. And I think to become a good hypnotherapist, you need to be a really good listener. Not just listen to the surface stuff, but all the other stuff that wasn't said.
The subtle things that are being said.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on.
Been a pleasure.
Now, where can people find you? If you want to do any promo. Listen, I know that's 6-week waiting time.
Yeah. Oh, it's creeping up again, I tell you now.
I mean, I'll put a link to your website and stuff like that in the show notes.
Yeah.
But apart from that.
Yeah, so I'm Wellington based. So my clinic, I've got 2 clinics actually. I'm at Petone at the Manuka Health Centre on Monday afternoons. And I'm in Wellington Central in Johnston Street from Tuesday to Friday. So, I mean, the best way to get hold of me is literally look on my website, meredithmccarthy.com, and go to my online booking system. Don't just email me
please.
because I just have so many people I'm dealing with, and if you can imagine, I've got 7 people a day and they're block booked, and it's just like
you need a personal
crazy.
assistant. That's what you need. Yeah. All right, well, guys, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, if you enjoyed that, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the left-hand side. And to watch other episodes, click one of those squares on the right. If you only want to listen to this and don't have time to watch the full video, you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are listened to online. Thanks. Bye.